We have a very unique episode for you today because I got to attend the Homesteaders of America Conference. And I'm telling you, when people think about this conference, I think they almost kind of have too narrow a view of what actually goes on there because it's pretty exciting. And one of the best things about it is not just the information you would expect to get about homesteading, it's about the people that you meet. One of the things I love about Homesteaders of America is I feel like I have met my people whenever I show up there. We had a great time. I got to give the kickoff speech for it. And here's what you need to know about this kickoff speech. It almost didn't happen. Why? Because apparently I'm a pretty dangerous guy. That's right. Amy Fewell, head of Homesteaders of America, called me up a couple weeks beforehand and told me that it looked like the insurance company was going to deny the permit that they've had for this event for 8 years because I was coming as a speaker. And so I told Amy, look, I don't want you to lose out on an event that is very, very important to this organization, very, very important to all the people that buy their tickets to go there. This place is usually sold out 7 months before it actually takes place. I said, so take me off the speaking list. I'd love to still attend if that's okay, but take me off the speaking list. And Amy looked at me and she said, yeah, we don't do that. We will find a way to make it work. I just thought it was funny and wanted you to know. So I made sure when she did make it work that I gave a speech that, well, hopefully the audience was very engaged with. They appeared to be, and we got to take a really, really good Q&A period as well. So that is what you're going to see today. Hope you like it. Here it is. All right, is my mic working? Can everyone hear me all right? All right, well, Amy actually left off the most important thing you need to know about me, and that is, apparently, I'm a fairly dangerous man. And the reason for this is not because of any of this stuff about the military or whatnot. No. No, Amy texted me about a week ago and says, well, Nick, we just heard from the insurance company that handles our policy for the Homesteaders of America Conference, and they specifically listed you as the reason we can't get a policy this year. And I was honored because I am a threat to hypocrisy. But I said, Amy, look, this is an incredibly important event. You guys worked so hard to make this happen. If you got to take me off the speaker list, you got to take me off the speaker list. And she goes, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And so she fought through it, and we all got to be here today, despite the incredible threat I am to everyone's safety and tranquility. So I want to say one other thing. Now, apparently I got an hour's worth of time to talk to you, and I'm going to use a lot of that on Q&A because I can't think of enough stuff to talk to for an hour, so I'm going to make you guys do half the work. But I also want to recognize that there is another member of the Virginia House of Delegates here, Delegate Ann Farrell-Tata, all the way from Virginia Beach. And this is very important because I'm trying to get more and more delegates to show up to this because I need more food freedom allies in the Virginia House of Delegates. So Ann, thank you very much. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about food freedom within the legislature and some of the work that's gone on. I've got to say right off the bat that the VICFA, that is one of the best organizations that you can be affiliated with here in Virginia when it comes to actually fighting for food freedom legislation. Because over the last several years, I've carried quite a few pieces of legislation. And I remember coming into the Virginia General Assembly as a young, idealistic young man thinking that, well, this is simple. I'm just going to make a very, very passionate appeal for why we should have things like raw milk. And of course, reasonable human beings are going to say, yes, free people, adults should be able to make their own decisions about what sort of milk they consume, right? No, you would have thought I'd kick somebody's puppy. Like, if you would have told me that I'm going to get up there and say, hey, I think people should be able to legally purchase raw milk, maybe along with the marijuana you let them purchase now. Like, why can't they do raw milk? Why is it easier to get fentanyl than raw milk in the Commonwealth of Virginia, right? This is ridiculous. Surely we can say that free people can make this decision. And I watched as just about every single major industry leader within the agricultural sector and the pediatrics sector, because apparently every single child in America died before we had regulations on raw milk. I don't even know how we made it this far, civilizationally speaking. And so I'm listening to these arguments. I'm like, whoa, I did not count on this kind of resistance to this. And I found it wasn't just that, it was several things. And I would carry a bill. And then a lot of people in the food freedom movement would be like, who is this guy? Who's this delegate that's carrying stuff that hasn't shown up to any of our meetings, talked to any of us? And we got into cross purposes where they would say, Nick, we like what you're trying to do, but you need to word it this way. And then they would show up to testify, and I'd be like, why would you say that in testimony before a committee? But this last year, something amazing happened. We all got together on the same sheet of music. We all laid out what we wanted to do. We developed a strategy. We briefed everyone that was going to testify. I briefed them which committee they were going to go to. And keep in mind, when she talked about the subcommittees I chair, no, that was last year. We ain't in charge anymore. Turns out when we ain't in charge, they don't put me in charge of anything. So now I'm having to brief bills to subcommittees before subcommittee chairmen who I know don't like me a whole lot. And that's putting it nicely. And I remember the first subcommittee, the first hurdle we got to pass for what started off as a pickle bill, but then turned into a cake pop bill, which included pickles in a weird way. I'll explain. But what we were essentially doing is, again, we were saying, okay, look, people are allowed to sell acidified vegetables. They're allowed to sell pickles at farmers markets and whatnot, but the cap was so low, it was like $3,000. It was so low that, hey, let's just adjust it for inflation. Let's move it up to $9,000 a year. And then the governor came in and said, Nick, we have this lady who was selling cake pops, and VDAX came and shut her down and started fining her because she had advertised on Facebook that she was going to be here selling cake pops. Do you think we can add this onto your bill and remove the restrictions for this and allow people to be able to sell various goods at a whole host of events that weren't legal up to that point? And let's clarify the language that if you mention on social media you're going to be there selling these things, the police don't kick in your door. I said, Governor, this is a great idea. Yes, let's add it all onto the bill. So I get the bill together and I show up to the subcommittee and I'm like, okay, well, the bill's a good idea, but I'm the patron, so we'll see what happens. And I get done briefing it, and VICFA gets up and they make their case, and all of the witnesses that they brought along came on, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Everybody had their facts together. Nobody went off script, because believe me, there's been times when people have gone a little bit off script. I once remember a friend of mine screaming at the committee chairman and calling him a liar, which strangely enough doesn't work with the convincing thing. And it's beautiful. And all of a sudden, I get a couple of questions from the subcommittee, but nothing too crazy. And then all of a sudden, like, everyone is ready to vote, and they're going to vote for this thing. And then one of my Republican colleagues says, well, I actually have another question. Okay, you know that dude in school that asks questions on like a Friday afternoon? This is a good guy. He's a friend of mine. I shot him a look that I have not given to another human being since I was in Iraq. Right? And he goes, well, and he looks at me and he goes, I think we're ready to vote. And so we're ready to vote, and it goes through, I think it goes through like 8-1. 8-1. Okay, everyone hold their breath, right? 8-1, so it goes through. He comes up to me later, he goes, Nick, you looked a little upset. I said, the last time I looked at someone that way, I just ripped a bag off their head and they were zip tied, right? So yeah, I was a little bit upset. I said, I knew they wanted to kill my bill. I didn't know you wanted to kill it. So we got it all worked out. He votes through it, goes to the full committee, goes right through the full committee. I didn't even have to show up to testify. And then, okay, we're good on the House side. Now we're going over to the Senate. They don't like me either. right? So we go over to the Senate. I'm like, okay, how's this going to go? Once again, Vicfa shows up, does an excellent job. All of the people that come up and testify, excellent job. And then one of my colleagues on my side of the aisle decides to start helping me with my bill. And he goes, well, Nick, you're only raising it to $12,000. It should be $20,000. And I'm sitting here. You need to understand something. If the Senate changes anything with this bill, anything, it has to go back to the House. And in between it passing the House and going to the Senate, I've already made everybody mad again. Like, I had been like quasi-nice. And Ann will tell you, we all have certain roles to play in the General Assembly. My role is usually leading the floor debate. When you lead the floor debate, you make people angry. So everybody that had voted for my bill that I really, really needed to be on board with this was probably not going to vote for it if they got a second look at it, again, because I'm the one carrying it, and politics is basically just junior high. Anyway. So it goes through, and I'm looking at, and again, now I'm looking at my Senate colleagues who like, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but there has been a compromise that everyone has agreed to, and if you tweak anything, you could kill this thing. And so we get it passed, passes out of the Senate, and we get a bill signing. And here's what was really nice about this, is that Governor Youngkin actually made this the first official bill signing he did for that entire General Assembly session. I've been in the General Assembly 9 years. It's the first governor's pen I've ever gotten, right? And he did it in such a way to where he had a bunch of people show up, some of them here, and they actually did a little farmer's market right there in front of the governor's mansion. And it was an excellent opportunity for a number of my colleagues who, quite frankly, don't get out to a lot of farmers markets. They don't get out to a lot of conventions like this, to be able to talk with the people that provide these goods, provide these services, and understand that the people that they're talking to are people that are genuinely invested in this issue, not just as an occupation, but really as a way of life. And many of them got into it for a variety of different reasons. Some people love this as an industry. They love to farm. They love to raise animals. Some people did it because there's health concerns that, quite frankly, the grocery store is not appealing to, but this community is. And we don't need to shackle this community. We need to unleash it and be able to allow everyone in here to be able to do what you do, which, quite frankly, should just be a natural right. We don't need the government constantly intervening every 5 seconds to micromanage everything we do and everything we eat. So we got something passed. And we're going to shoot for even more next year. This next session, we're going to do something that's a much bigger haul, because we're actually trying to add food freedom into the Virginia Constitution. Now, in order to add something into the Virginia Constitution, you have to carry the resolution. You have to get the language of that resolution passed through the House. Then it has to pass through the Senate. Then there has to be an intervening election. Then you have to, with the new General Assembly that you have to pass the exact same language through the House, then again through the Senate, and then it goes to the ballot. And the people of Virginia vote on it. If it makes it through that entire process, then it goes into the Virginia Constitution. Now, I'm not going to give you any false hope that I think this resolution has just an excellent chance of flying through the General Assembly. But we got to start somewhere. And we've got to generate interest in this. And we got to have people asking more questions like, wait a second, this isn't already law? This isn't already protected? Because I don't think most people understand how intrusive the government has become with respect to what they eat. And now, don't get me wrong, I know the government has a wonderful track record when it comes to food. I mean, who's not loving that food pyramid, right? We all know that was just following the science all the way through, right? Based off of whoever paid for it. So we need more people to be interested in this as a topic, because ultimately it's not just about the produce you buy or the meat you buy. It's about free people having the right to make their own decisions for their life and for their own family's well-being. That's a good point. But you know what's also a good point is that if you want to look your best as a dude, you need to go over to True Classic. And I know what I'm talking about here because a couple of years ago, my wife bought me a bunch of t-shirts. I was like, why are you buying me these random t-shirts from this random company I haven't heard of? And then I put one on. I was like, ooh, I kind of like this. But more importantly, she liked it. And like I've always said, gentlemen, if she likes you putting on those clothes, she probably likes taking them off you. And that is exactly what True Classic provides. And now it's not only t-shirts. Right? I used to just use the regular t-shirts just like this to go to the gym because quite frankly, I liked how they fit when I was in the gym. But now they have an entire line of workout equipment. They've got hoodies, they've got jeans, they've got shorts. I can literally do just like about all of my shopping now at True Classic. And believe me, I got a lot of it. One of these days, I'll wear the shirt that Tina describes as my hot guy shirt because, again, they just fit right. And for those guys out there, too, that you're looking at maybe getting back into shape, or maybe you're someone that is already getting into shape at the gym or whatnot, I will tell you this, one of the most frustrating things I experienced going back into the gym was wearing workout equipment or t-shirts that didn't quite fit right. And you're working out all day and you just feel like, man, this shirt just doesn't fit. And then all of a sudden you get something like True Classic, which is a little bit tighter around the arms and shoulders, maybe provides a little bit more room in the belly that you are working on. And all of a sudden you feel a little bit more confident when you're at the gym. You feel more confident when you're walking around. Let's face it, guys, most of the t-shirts out there are not built to fit us the way they should, right? A lot of outfits out there that fit women the way they like to be fit. But guys, we don't have that until now. So go to trueclassic.com, go on there, use the link in my description. You're going to save a ton of money when you bundle. And like I said, they have a lot of great stuff. So bundle it all up, right? Get that, look good for your lady, because again, like I said, if she likes it on you, she'll probably like taking it off. True Classic. So that's the mission for session in 2025. We're going to be looking at some other things as too, where there's certain things we want to go after that's maybe a little bit low-hanging fruit. But it's time that we actually start to look at this in a big way, because I want people asking those questions. And again, with the help of organizations like Homesteaders of America, with the help of organizations like VICFA, I have no doubt that we're going to gain traction. It's going to be a slow process, but we're going to gain traction. Because ultimately, what a lot of people first discovered during COVID was that supply chain that we've all gotten used to doesn't always work the way we want. What a lot of other things have been revealed when everyone was busy following the science, is a lot of things we've been told about our food isn't necessarily true. And I know what got me really interested in this environment, because when I first started carrying food freedom legislation, I didn't have a garden, I didn't have chickens, I just believed that you were free people and you should be able to do what free people should be able to do. But by coming more invested in this community, I learned a couple of things. One, this community has a lot to offer to the legislative process, provided that they get involved and that there's mutual trust between the people that want to see this legislation pass and the legislators that we have to get it through. The second one is, and I mean this very sincerely, every session, my faith in humanity dips a little bit. All right, but when I come here, it's replenished. I can't emphasize this enough. Every time I come here, and I love it when people come by, I was like, oh, this is our first time here. I said, you're about to realize that you're finding your people. Amen. Right? And more than ever, that's incredibly important. For a variety of reasons. Not just with respect to the issues that we talk about here, not just with respect to the industries that we're all looking to support, but part of a larger intentional community, which I think is going to be very, very important. So again, thank you all for having me here. Thank you guys for being here and what you do. I'm going to take some questions now, if you guys have any questions of me. And yeah. I think we got a microphone here in the center, if you wouldn't mind coming up to that. Just state your name, social security number, mother's maiden name, pet's names. Anything I need to raid your bank account? Go ahead.
I'm Michelle from Michigan, and I was wondering, with the election coming up, are you optimistic or bullish on some of the policies and things that Robert Kennedy is looking at doing?
So I'll tell you what's I find really interesting about Robert Kennedy. There is a lot of issues with Robert Kennedy that him and I do not see eye to eye on. But I love his skepticism of the FDA. I'll tell you what. There's a values alignment right there, and I think that's important. And I like the fact that we're not just simply saying, okay, if you don't belong to this particular political party, you can't play. It's like, no, do you have an interest? Is there values alignment on something that we can work together on? And if the answer is yes, let's work together on it. And so I'm actually very encouraged that I think we're going to see that in a couple of different areas, just not just this one, but several other on the economic side. And I think that's important because ultimately, the crisis that I think we're experiencing in the United States right now is not necessarily a partisan crisis as much as it is a values crisis. And what do we actually want and expect out of a country? What do we believe about ourselves as a nation? What do we believe about our history? And I always say I'm willing to work with anybody that will be honest, that actually believes that there's such a thing as objective truth, objective morality, logic, right? Empiricism. If we can agree on these basic things, I can work with people that disagree with me on certain topics. Who I can't work with is someone that will lie to me or pretend that reality doesn't exist the moment it doesn't suit their political ideology. So.
Good morning.
Morning.
Amy from Central Illinois, our first time here. One of my questions is, I'm in the medical field, and so doing a little bit of research in our legislation, different bills and how they're dead and just sitting there waiting 10 years. I guess one of my questions is how do we find, are there keywords for us to be looking for to be following some of this legislation and talking to our delegates and making sure that things are kind of moving along?
Yeah, this is a great question. So almost every state house is a little bit different, but pretty much every state, most states in the U.S. are what we call citizen legislatures. There's only 4 states that have full-time legislatures. What that means is here in Virginia, I'm in session for 60 days out of the year in even years, 45 in odd years. We will go through 2,500 bills in a 60-day period. So it's a quick process, right? But it's a good thing. You don't want a full-time legislature. Please, you do not want a full-time state legislature. The full-time federal one is bad enough. But the way you look for it is almost every state has a website where you can actually search for legislation. Here in Virginia, it's called LIS, Legislative Information Services. Now, here's what I think you need to understand. A lot of times people will start to get involved in politics and they're like, I'm going to call my delegate, or I'm going to call my representative, or I'm going to call my state senator, or I'm going to call all of them, or I'm going to send them an email. I'm going to send all of them an email. You can do that. I'm not saying it doesn't have any effect. I'm just saying it's probably the least effective way that you can address these things. One of the best ways that you can affect legislation is find an organization that you trust that regularly works in your state capital. Right? So again, I mentioned for food freedom and things of that issue, VICFA in Virginia is a great one. Right? Virginia Independent Consumers and Farmers Association. VICFA is great. There's also some other local groups, but they're an excellent organization to work with. The reason why this is so important, I would say, and back me up, I would say about 60% of bills die in a subcommittee that have only been seen by about 9 representatives. Now, this is not because something nefarious is going on. It's because when you've got to go through 2,500 bills in a 60-day period, you have to have a process for vetting them. And so a bill comes in, it goes to the Speaker's office, it gets assigned to the appropriate committee. The committee chair assigns it to the appropriate subcommittee, and that's your first battle. Now, if you get it out of the subcommittee into full committee, you've probably got about an 80% chance that bill is going to the floor. If you get it to the floor, 90 to 95% chance that bill is getting through the chamber. So don't spend your time early on talking to a bunch of delegates that will never see that bill if it doesn't get out of the subcommittee. Focus all of your attention on the 3 to 4 people you might need to flip in order to get it through. And the people that can give you that information are the organizations that are regularly working on this during session and off session. So find an organization that you trust, find a representative that you trust, and that's the way that you get this done. We had stuff before that were dying because there was a miscommunication. I wasn't effectively communicating with the people on the ground with VICFA. They weren't effectively communicating with me at times. And the end result is, even when we got a bill we liked, if we didn't coordinate on how we talked about that bill in committee, that can kill it. I've had very enthusiastic witnesses get up and kill the bill they were very enthusiastic about. So that's what I would advise you to do. Yes, you can search it, but find those organizations that you trust, work with them, because they're going to maximize the value of the time that you have to contribute to fighting for legislation. And not only fighting for legislation, but killing the bad ones. I got to say, some of the best work we've done in Richmond has not been passing good bills, it's been killing bad ones. So I hope that helps. Yes.
Hey, I'm Julie from Chesterfield. Just want to say we thank you for your service. We love everything you're doing. Huge fans. My husband and I, huge fans. I just have a burning question for you. How many mugs are in your famous collection? We love everyone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we do have a rather sizable mug collection at this point. I can't tell you the actual number because it fluctuates so much. People will send me mugs. Every once in a while, somebody will send me a mug, and I'll be like, "Thank you for the mug. My channel's family friendly, so I don't know that it's very witty, but I know that I can use this one for." But yeah, it's definitely probably in the 60s to 70s at this point. So
Extra cabinet space for that.
my wife, who's a very patient woman, like I don't know what it is, but I know that when she gets to heaven, God's going to be like, "I'm sorry," like it's, you know. But she has told me that sooner or later the mugs need to go somewhere else, because if I take any more of her cabinet space, there's going to be issues. So,
Thanks for all you do. Thank you.
Howdy. Dave Coley from Montana. So I'm wondering about, what do we do when we don't have a lot of people representing food freedom in our local legislature or anything like that, and what do we do this coming and following voting season? Or
sure, I would say if you can find anybody, which usually every legislature has somebody that this is an issue that they're either passionate about or they're very open to, they're receptive to, and then it's about fostering that relationship with them. It's also about, when you look at other people running for office, here's one of the things I tell people. Sometimes there's this an assumption that if a legislator is more conservative, well then of course they will believe in greater food freedom. That is not a guarantee. I know plenty of conservative legislators that believe that we have to regulate all of this because otherwise we wouldn't be able to build hospitals fast enough. Something Joel Salatin likes to talk about in some of his exchanges with legislators. So it's important to understand, find the people that you already agree with and build a base around that. But then when other people are looking to run, ask them more direct questions, right? Sometimes if you even say, "Do you support food freedom?" "Sure do. Freedom's in it, right?" "Yes." No, ask them specific questions. You know, what do you think about, raw milk? What do you think about, some of these issues that are a little bit more controversial? And get people on the books, get people on record as saying, "Yes, I support this." Because once you got public statements and once you've got a voting record, that's a much safer place for people to be in. So find the people that are already there. Certainly vet candidates as they're running. And then one of the best things you can do is again, develop those state-level organizations, state-level associations, where you can actually maybe start going out and effectively lobbying and also recruiting people to run.
Hi, Leah from Remington. I was curious about the local school choice for Virginia. I know it's something that used to used to talk about a lot, but I haven't heard you talk about it in a while. And as a working mom with a farm, and the idea of trying to homeschool is difficult, but there's a lot of schools that do like 2-3 days a week but they're still kind of cost prohibitive. So I feel like if we were able to get school choice in Virginia, I could use the funds for school choice to go to a homeschooling school, and that would be helpful. So I was wondering if that's fallen off the radar, or if it's just been too difficult to try to get through, and if so, what local Virginians could do to help with that.
Sure. No, it's a great question. I've been asked before, like, if there's one thing you could get, one piece of legislation, but it would cost you your seat, what would it be? And it's always school choice. It's always school choice. It is arguably the most important issue, in my opinion. And again, it's not that I'm known for being a Second Amendment guy, I'm known for being a pro-life guy, I'm known for being a food freedom guy, but if you ask me what's the single most important one, it's education. Because here's the deal. You can raise your kids all day long with faith in God, with love of country, with the belief in the free market, with the belief in individual liberty and personal responsibility. You can do all of that. But if it isn't reinforced in the educational institutions that your kids go to, well, then at the very least, they're getting conflicting signals. And so I'm appreciative of everybody that is fighting hard to try to make the public school system better. But the thing I always remind people is it's the government school system, and it was designed for the mass production of education. It was not designed with your child in mind. And it never will be, because it can't be. So I have carried everything from the Tebow bill, which would allow homeschoolers to be able to participate in sports. I've carried education savings account bills. We're looking now at some tax credit bills. The biggest organization standing in the way of any sort of school choice is teachers' unions, Superintendents Association, Principals Association, Virginia Education Association. And quite frankly, we've got a lot of Republicans that don't want it. That's the bottom line. We've got Republicans that don't want it in some of the most conservative districts in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because the public school system is the largest employer in their district. So that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against a massive entrenched lobby that has a lot of money, has a lot of credibility, and doesn't want there to be options. And there's two things I would tell you. We can continue to lobby, and we should. And especially as you're looking at candidates, again, whether it's an existing candidate or one that's looking to run, don't ask them, do you like school choice? Because they're going to say yes. And those same people will vote against the bill. You got to get specific. Do you support ESAs? Do you support a tax credit? Figure out what it is. The other thing that we need to understand here is that there's a lot of division within the school choice community on what the appropriate role is. The HSLDA, which I love and respect, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they oppose education savings accounts because they don't like the idea of government funds influencing education to include homeschool. And I get it, they're worried about the camel's nose under the tent. So here's what I'm going to tell everybody in here. We will continue to fight this legislatively. But like a lot of things, we're fighting against something that has become entrenched over a century. Now, the good news is in Virginia, you can leave. You can leave that system. But like you said, it can be cost prohibitive. And the one thing I would really encourage each of you to do is go back to your churches and say, why is it cost prohibitive? We've got a building. We got a building, you got a school. I think it is wonderful that the church sends a lot of money overseas for the purposes of evangelism and assistance. I think all of that is good. I have nothing against it. I encourage it. But if you want to know why we're watching our own country disintegrate, maybe it's because the church ceded its responsibilities over to the government, and now we're curious as to why this is going on. So I will continue to fight legislatively for as long as I'm there. And I will continue to work with anybody that wants to help us get anything that we do that will alleviate some of that financial burden in order to make it more possible. But anybody who's waiting on that is going to be waiting on a huge battle when I do believe that there's a much more effective and efficient option available, and that's for our communities to start banding together and being able to provide more curriculum and opportunities at that level. I can tell you the next big thing that we are doing with our channel, whether it's making the argument, whether it's our community that we're starting to build through that, is we're looking for more ways to make homeschooling and homeschool co-ops more accessible to people that legitimately right now either can't afford it because of inflation and everything else, or are just scared and don't know where to start. Let's start removing those fears, because I have become more and more convinced that if all we're trying to do is change these massive bureaucracies, well, they know how to fight the battle in the General Assembly. They know how to stop you there. But man, as soon as you pull your kids out and you stop playing the game that they've rigged against you, that's where they start to get scared. And that's what I want them, scared. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nick. Simplify.
Hello again.
Hey, sir.
Garrett Brockwell, Orchard Hill Farm, Louisa County. One question I was wondering is, say we're in February, General Assembly, hadn't really been paying attention to any of the bills coming up, and you say, oh, Freitas has this new bill forward. How would you recommend people go forward? And they haven't plugged into VICFA or any other organization like that. How do they just start cold? Do you recommend that they go sit in a committee, not speak, but sit in a committee? What would that process look like in your mind?
First of all, Garrett was one of the people that came and testified and did an outstanding job. So thank Garrett that you can sell more stuff. Contacting the legislator, contacting the patron of the bill is one of the best ways that you can get involved, because I know in our office, if you're interested in one of our bills and you want to help, the biggest thing we'll say is, wonderful, let's sit down and talk. And if you're comfortable getting up and testifying, we'll talk to you about, we're not going to tell you, here's what to say, read off of this. But we'll say, hey, maybe stay away from this, maybe focus more on this, share your experience. All of that's powerful and it can be moving to people. But the one thing I would say is, don't just randomly show up to a committee and start talking. That's where all of a sudden, because again, you may be very passionate, you may be very, very informed on the subject, but are you informed about each member that is listening to you? Because that's who you got to convince. And you may be making a great argument for your friends, but are you making a great argument for the person that's skeptical of this bill? Let us help you develop that. So if you got a patron for a bill that you really like, chances are they put some study into this, they put some thought into it, they're working with organizations. Call them up, say, hey, I love your bill, I appreciate you carrying it. But we don't hear that a lot. We hear a lot of, what the heck are you doing? But when somebody says, hey, we really appreciate what you're doing, how can we help? We're very eager to let you know exactly what we can use and what would be helpful. And there's all kinds of ways to testify in Virginia. You don't even have to be in person. We allow online testimony. So we're very happy to provide you the tools that you need to be the most effective you can be when that bill is going before committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Thanks. Will somebody let me know when I'm like 5 minutes to the end here? Okay, cool. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Addison Gills. I'm from Cartersville, Virginia. I've had the good pleasure of serving on the State Fair Board for the better part of a decade now, and I also currently find myself a law student, something I didn't expect. And so something that concerns me, or something that interests me, is that with the Supreme Court's recent overturning of the Chevron doctrine, which allows federal agencies to interpret laws, things that are for the judiciary as defined in our Constitution. How can you and how can legislatures around the country take advantage of this relative weakness that these agencies have now to make clear and unambiguous laws to protect the lawyers, as we're now going to be entering a time of great litigation?
Yeah. So the Chevron decision, first of all, I was thrilled it was overturned, because what the Chevron decision essentially said was that when a regulatory agency, when an executive branch agency promulgates regulations, it is assumed that it's legal and in accordance with the law. So when you show up to challenge one of these regulations, you are already fighting at a disadvantage. Well, now you're at least entering with, it's supposed to be a level playing field. The reason why the original Chevron decision was so bad was because I think one of the greatest threats that we have to our country is a massive unelected bureaucracy that has an enormous amount of power that it was never intended to. And why does it have so much power? Well, because here's something legislators love to do. Legislators love to write bills like, save the environment, right? Because who's against that? And you better not vote against that bill, even though it was 500 pages and nobody read it. And then they will do things like, the EPA will promulgate regulations in order to affect the Save the Environment Act. Well, the next thing you know, you've got 500 new pages of federal regulations with fines, fees, any number of things that could shut your business down, take your property away. And how many legislators voted on that? 0. So one of the things that I think is the most important on the legislative side is to do things like the REINS Act. Rand Paul had this on the Senate side. I tried to carry a version of this in Virginia, where we basically tell regulatory agencies, when we authorize you to do something, what we're now going to say is, you get to go out there and you get to recommend what you think the regulations, fines, fees, or whatever else it should be. Then you will bring that back to the General Assembly. We will take another look at it and decide whether or not we really want to do this, or whether we need to amend that legislation. Because then we're on the hook for it. And if there's one thing politicians don't want to be, it's on the hook for stuff. But that's the way it's supposed to be. You elected us to be on the hook for stuff. So that's one of the biggest things we need to do in order to change the way we look at things legislatively. Another thing is one issue per bill. One issue per bill. But the good thing for an aspiring lawyer is that we are entering into a realm now where people are actually going to be able to sue these executive branch agencies, these regulatory agencies, and actually go on a much more level playing field, which again I think is a positive thing. What we still need to do in order to make sure that this is carried out the way we want is, again, I think things like the REINS Act, things like one issue per bill. It's about the legislator once again taking back its power, which is to make law, and the executive agency back into the realm of just enforcing it. And I think, and honestly, this is one area where those of us, let's say, a little bit more liberty inclined, have had a huge deficit. We don't have enough lawyers that really enjoy suing regulatory agencies. And I can't believe I'm up here saying nice things about lawyers, my gosh. But man, the good ones are great. The good ones are great. We had Jason Mieres on our podcast a while back, and the name of the show we did was Suing the Federal Government and Winning. And we need more of that, because here's also the dirty little secret with respect to a lot of things that the feds do. The feds rely on you to just comply, right? Because they get to use your tax dollars to defend themselves in court when they do something wrong. And so once again, it's why we need more organizational power. It's why we need more people coming together and saying, no, you're not going to get out of this so easy. We have an opportunity right now to sue the federal bureaucracy back into its proper role, and we should take every advantage to do it. And our attorney generals need to be leading that charge, because if the feds are going to use our tax dollars to sue us, well, then I want this state to at least use our tax dollars to sue them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Sean Hendricks of Greenville, North Carolina. And for me, I'm tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. And I think politics, the people that are attracted to it tend to be the wrong type of people. But for the right type of people, how does one, short of getting you to come to North Carolina and run for governor, we got to have better people for better fruit in politics, right? And so, the guy that wants to get in, what do you recommend people who want to get involved in politics and start helping make a change in their state, rather than hoping the guy they vote for does what they want?
So I think it's important. I had somebody ask me once when I first got asked to run. First time I got asked to run, I said no, which was the smart answer. But
that's probably why you're a good fit.
Right, yeah. And but the second time I got asked, I agreed to it. And I remember somebody asked me, going like, Nick, will you do what we the people want? I'm like, we the people don't agree. Right? Well, will you do what your constituents want? My constituents don't agree. I said, here's what representative government is. Representative government is not me taking a poll every time I got to do a vote. Representative government is me being honest with you about what I believe, why I believe it, what I intend to do, what's my thought process. So that way you can decide, is everything he just described about himself, is everything she just described about herself, do those things reflect what I want represented in my state house or in Congress? And if the answer is yes, then that's the sort of person that you should be able to trust and vote the correct way, and to follow these processes, and to know when a bill gets amended in such a way to where it's no longer palatable, or to know when a bill gets amended in such a way to where now it is palatable. But there has to be a certain degree of trust there. Now, I will tell you this, Reagan was right, trust but verify. Because it becomes very, very easy to be corrupted by the trappings of power and the legislature and everything else. I don't know what it is, but as soon as I get down to Richmond and I'm voting on people's bills, I become better looking, I become smarter, I become funnier. Like all of a sudden, oh gosh, Delegate Freitas, all my jokes are wonderful, right? Thank God my wife is like, no, that's no. Not a thing, honey. All right, so that's one. But here's the other thing I will tell you. Next year will be my 10th year in the General Assembly. I'm tired. It is, when you are in politics, because you just want to keep the government at bay, you want to keep it in its proper place, you say no a lot, and you don't say yes very much. And that's not very conducive for getting things done or getting what you want or having influence. Saying yes is how you get influence and power. Spending money is how you get influence and power. Bringing home the bacon gets you influence and power. And when you stand up and say, well, no, I don't want to bring home the bacon, I want to keep it from leaving my district in the first place. That sounds good, but no names are going on that building, right? And the other thing I will tell you is look, if you're more on the, again, I like to call it the liberty side of the house, you are naturally skeptical of politicians, as you should be. But nothing is more frustrating than when you have fought year after year after year after year, and then you're getting stabbed in the back by some of your own supporters because they heard you did something. Not calling you up, Nick, did this happen? Nick, did you do this? No. Well, I heard this. How long have you known me? Does that sound like me? Here's the second thing that'll get you. I'm mad at you because you didn't show up to my event. Look, if you want the politician that absolutely loves being at every single glad-handing event that there is, right? Or do you want the guy that's likes his wife and kids, still has to have a full-time job because the state legislature pays House of Delegates $17,600 a year. That covers gas money, right? Right, so we got to have full-time jobs. And so you're really going to have to ask yourself, what do I want out of this person? The other thing you have to realize is this, because I've had fights with people that I agree with on most things, but they wanted to take a certain approach, and I didn't think it would work, and I wanted to take a certain approach. And then they threatened me. And the thing I always remind people is, if you want a fighter, that means sometimes they might be fighting you. The question is why? If it's a difference of strategy, maybe you have to trust the person that you put in this position to be able to make those decisions on the fly. If it's a question of principle, get rid of them. Get rid of them. They start surrendering on principle in order to execute a strategy or to get rid of them. I would far rather leave the legislature with my integrity intact than stay without it. And thankfully, I do have people around me, my wife, my friends, and whatnot, that they are just as committed to that as I am. Because there's times where it's tempting, man, like, does it really matter? Do I got to vote no on this? Does it really matter? Yeah, it matters. It matters. So if you have somebody that you trust, fight with them. And look, if they need to be kicked in the butt, kick them in the butt, but also support them when they stand. Understand that, again, if they're married and they have kids and they have a job and the whole deal, they might not be able to show up to every chicken dinner, right? And then on the other side of that, if you want to get involved, the way I ended up getting involved was not, I want to run for office. The way I ended up getting involved was, I want to make a difference in my community and I want to influence the things that I can influence. So I don't like it when somebody shows up to run for office that I've never seen before, never met before, and they tell me, I'm going to fight for you. What do you mean you're going to fight?
You're going to start now?
Yeah, you're going to start now? You're going to fight now that you want to run for office? Don't tell me you want to fight, man. Show me your scars. Where have you already been fighting? Do some time in the trenches before you presume to lead me. And so that's what I advise. If you really want to run for office, do some time in the trenches. Learn what it means to actually do this thing. And then you will be shocked at how many people ask you to do it.
Thank you so much.
Tiffany Coral here in Frederick County. Thank you for being a great oxymoron and an honest politician, and being a true advocate for us all here. My question is, as you kind of go down to Clark County, you see the solar fields, the solar farms that have taken over our farmlands.
Yeah.
How do we protect our farmlands from going to these conglomerates, to being, turned into these, neighborhoods? How do we preserve that by also keeping in check the government at the same time?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I will say this. I've had people ask me before, like farmers that I respect, who said, Nick, I'm trying to save what I can, and being able to put some of this into solar helps me, and it's my property. I thought you believed in property rights, Nick. I'm like, I do believe in property rights, but here's the problem. All of this is tax subsidized. If this could actually survive on its own, it would, but it can't, and so they go to the General Assembly, and they get little carve-outs, and they get subsidies, and they get everything else. So if you're going to use taxpayers to pay for your solar panels, no, I don't got to agree to that. The other thing I would say, this is a minor thing, but I really encourage everyone to use it. And my wife is the one that came up with this, so Tina gets full credit. She goes, I don't call them solar farms. They're not farms. They're industrial solar fields, because they're going to scrape the living crap out of all that topsoil, and then they're going to put a bunch of things down, and who knows how long it actually lasts, and when they got to actually do it, the runoff and everything else. It's so amazing to me that some of the people that want to scream the loudest about saving the planet don't seem to have a whole lot of idea about how to actually do it. Some of the same people that I will see driving around an urban area going, farmland lost is lost forever. What do you think that is? I mean, gosh, if they want all this solar stuff, great, go put it on top of buildings in your urban areas. So a big part of it, and this is something that we fought within the legislature, and we have gotten concessions on it. We've also made sure that localities still have a lot of authority over this process. So this is one of the areas where you can have the biggest influence. Make sure your board of supervisors knows exactly where you stand on this and hold them to account. I've seen really, really strong local organizations stand up to this. I've also seen some really weird alliances on this one. I've seen organizations that are ones that I don't typically align with, and they got their reasons for opposing it, and I got mine, but hey, we both oppose it, so charge, let's do this thing, right? So that's a lot of it, making sure that your delegates know that you don't want any local authorities stripped, because there are a lot of efforts to try to push this from the state level. And the other side is to make sure that you are getting supervisors that understand that this is not what you want to see your county turn into.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Lucas from Alabama. I can't remember if it was you or someone else I was listening to was talking about how there's a lot of medically trained professionals, like former veterans and things like that, who cannot legally help other people with their medical expertise. Is there anything on the books, either advocating for freedom of alternative medical treatments, or anything that we should be aware of that would hinder it even more than it already is?
There's always stuff to hinder it. There have been efforts, and we have seen, COVID actually allowed us to extend medical freedom, but it's always within certain boundaries, right? So we were able to expand what nurse practitioners could do. I had a bill that tried to expand it even more, and that got shut down. But we were able to say nurse practitioners can do X, Y, and Z now. They don't need a doctor standing over their shoulder while they're doing it. But yeah, the quote I like to use is, a Special Forces 18 Delta, that's an SF medic. When that guy is over in Iraq or Afghanistan or the Philippines or wherever else, that guy can do OBGYN work, they can do geriatric work, they can do veterinarian work. Oh, and by the way, they can fix a sucking chest wound while under fire and calling in a 9-line medevac. But when they get back to the US of A, if they give you stitches for money, they're a criminal. Right? That is not because of public safety. That is because of the medical industrial complex that sets up regulations to benefit itself. And look, I got nothing against doctors. I got nothing against nurses. My mother's a nurse. I have a problem with people using the government to restrict supply in order to jack up their own prices. And I'll tell you one of the biggest organizations guilty of this, higher ed. If you want to know one organization, like one industry, I'll call it that I am just ready to completely go to war with, it is higher education. And it's not because I got a problem with higher education. It's because I got a problem with institutions that take your tax dollars in order to turn your kids into communists, while at the same time insisting that the only way that you can practice certain industries or occupations is if you get their permission by giving them money and going through their certification processes. And it really came to a head this last year when higher ed, the same higher ed, UVA spends $20 million a year on DEI. Their head DEI makes $500,000 a year in benefits and salary. And we had a program that said 90% disabled gets to go to college, them and their families. 90% disabled from military service. And they wanted to shut it down because it costs too much. One university in Virginia spends $20 million on DEI. We give them $3.8 billion in our budget. They came back and held veterans hostage to get another $65 million out of the taxpayers. I will never forgive them for that. So, I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but it goes back to the point of, in order to get more medical freedom, once again, you are fighting a massive medical establishment that has no incentive to reduce the sort of regulations because they will always say it's in the name of public safety. And look, maybe some of them are. But we have to start coming to the conclusion that there's a variety of ways that people can ensure quality goods and services. It's called the free market. It's called voluntary organizations and associations which can grade medical practitioners. We don't need to shut down everything through the force of law and tell people that are perfectly qualified, like 18 Deltas, you're not allowed to do anything unless you pay the right people money first. So there will continue to be legislation to try to expand that, but I'm not going to lie to you, you're fighting a massive medical industrial complex. Now I will say this, during COVID, when the science was telling us to ignore obvious reality, there were people that provided medical services. There were people that provided access to things that maybe the government didn't want them to provide access to. One of the most important things you will do these next couple of days is not just getting information on how to properly grow tomatoes or raise honeybees or slaughter a chicken. You will be networking with like-minded people who share your values. I will tell you right now, the government likes to be able to control economic activity. And they like to tell you that everything is about politics and democracy. What makes America unique, what has always made America unique, was not the fact that we get to elect politicians every 2, 4, and 6 years. It was that you got to actually decide what you did with your life, who you affiliated with, who you associated with, who you transacted with. And the more regulations and rules they put over the economy, the more they take away your freedom and then try to trade you the opportunity to vote every few years as a substitute. It isn't. So get to know the people that have actual skill sets. Not necessarily a credential. That could be important. But get to know people who have actual skill sets that you trust, that have a proven track record, and know who you're going to do business with when the government tells you you can't.
Sam Armel, Frederick County. Nick, what are ways that localities, I've heard you speak on state and how we can affect change at the state. How can we affect change in our localities? And how do we, within our localities, break down the barriers of these highly polarizing Democrat, Republican situations and help people assemble so that we can go and we can affect change when we're speaking with delegates and representatives and even the Board of Supervisors?
Well, first of all, I would say that Frederick County Homesteaders actually does an outstanding job of organization, local education, because here's the other part. Nobody wants to join another political group where we're going to influence politicians, but they like joining groups of common interests and common values, and they like to do stuff that's fun, not just listen to politicians speak. So the fact that you guys do that sort of work in Frederick County is incredibly important in fostering that level of community, because not everyone wants to be keeping up on this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But on the local level, you can actually have some of the most influence. Now, it's important to understand in a state like Virginia, we're a Dillon Rule state, which means your locality has no authority unless it's been granted to it by the state. Most states are home rule, which is to say the locality has inherent authority, but they can't supersede state law. It's a little bit different here. So that's why the state lobbying is so important. But so many decisions with respect to local ordinances on can you have chickens in a particular neighborhood, right? Are they gonna clear land for a particular, knowing who's on that planning commission, running people for the planning commission to get appointed to the planning commission, water and soil, showing up to your Board of Supervisors meeting. You show up to a Board of Supervisors meeting with 100 people, that has an impact. Because usually it's like 12 and 4 of them are the same people and they're a little crazy. It's just, so you show up with 100 on a particular issue, that has an oversized impact, because if 100 people are sitting in that Board of Supervisors room, they're going to assume that speaks for thousands. And so that's how you can have some of the biggest effect, also getting people to run for those local boards and sitting on those commissions. That's really important. Your planning commission has a lot of power, because the Board of Supervisors all the time will defer to the recommendations of the planning commission or planning board. So get people on those things, and it can have an oversized impact. Thanks.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Hi, Erin Bracco from Fairfax County, Virginia. How do we get Northern Virginia to secede and join Maryland?
So I had a bill that I thought was going to solve this whole problem. And I went to one of my colleagues in Northern Virginia and I said, I have an idea and I think it's going to be mutually beneficial. And of course he looks at me with a fair degree of skepticism. And I said, no, this is going to be great. We're going to take Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, and we're going to give it to DC in exchange for the Washington Redskins. So you guys get to be with DC that we all know you love. We get a pro football team, which we love. And we're calling them the Redskins, right? And it turns out he did not like that idea. I really thought it was guaranteed. But look, here's what I'll say. I don't want to give up any part of Virginia. I think it would be easier if we just took West Virginia back. I mean, that was totally unconstitutional. We take them back and we kind of flip some elections. No, but look, I think, again, this goes back to, if we can change a lot of the education system in this country, and we can change the way a lot of children are educated to actually appreciate our history, flaws and all, that's where I think you get generational change. And you know how I know that? Because that's how they got it. That's how they got it. When every single major culturally shaping institution, I hear a lot about voter fraud, and voter fraud is an issue. It's a serious issue. But let me ask you something. When every major culturally shaping institution, from the media to Hollywood to music to higher ed to your public schools, is overwhelmingly dominated by left-wing ideology, you really think they need to cheat to win? So we got to start taking back those culturally shaping institutions. We got to start fighting for them like we do in politics. And for those institutions that we have a hard time infiltrating back into, we have to set up competition to it. So.
Hi, my name's Liz. I'm from Bowie, so close to Annapolis. Recent person who woke up. I'm a nurse of 26 years, and the pandemic blew my mind, woke me up. Was settled with getting a shot that scared the crap out of me, or no longer being able to work anywhere. Once I saw that Texas acquiesced, I knew the rest of the country was going to go if Texas did it. So I don't really have a question. I just want to say that I want everybody to know that there are so many of us who are going to work no matter the weather, no matter the political climate. We see you. We hear you, and we believe what you believe. And we are frightened of what is happening too. And we are trying very hard to be better for ourselves and everyone else amongst the medical complex, amongst what other vaccine are they going to tell us is safe when it clearly is not, we clearly see it's not effective. We see patients every day, 30-year-olds with heart attacks, people who never have cancer and now have stage 4 cancer. It's blowing my mind. It is freaking us out. And I just want people to know that we see it, and we're doing our very best by coming here for the first time, by reading, by trying to see what can we do with our knowledge and schooling to do what we know is right. So I am here to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for believing in us, even though nobody knows me until this moment. And thank you, sir, for at least being out there for me to go, oh my God, there's finally people out there that are my people, and I didn't even know I was missing them until this moment.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. I'll take these two real quick, and then I just want to say one final thing, and you can all get out of here and go do more fun things.
Hey, Nick, thanks for being here. I have 3 questions, and I know we're short on time, so you can pick the one you want to answer.
Okay.
Number one, I've been voting for more years than I care to admit, and it's always the most important vote, right? So Nixon, Ford, Reagan, I mean, you go down the line and say, this is the most important. Well,
yeah.
I think this is really the most important, because my mind is just blown the fact that no one has, on the docket there has never won an election, never won an electoral college election, and here we are, an appointed person is on the presidential list. It just blows my mind. So what, I guess, can we do to stop that from happening again, or is it even possible? And if we lose this one, I think America's voting freedom rights are probably gone. So how do you see how we can affect this the most and spreading the word?
I'm actually going to, so I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to answer that in my final remarks.
Okay,
so if I could take the other question right behind you, and then I'll answer that one. Is that okay?
Perfect.
And then I'll stay after if you have another question for me. I'll stay after if anyone's got a question they get to. Yes, sir.
Hey, morning. Real quick, how can military members and federal employees get involved in a lot of these levels you're talking about without violating the Hatch Act and risking employment loss?
Yeah, so the Hatch Act, obviously that prevents you from doing certain things, especially on the monetary side or anything in uniform or public. There's a guy named Cameron Hamilton, actually ran for Congress, didn't win in the primary, but he's a great guy. And he's actually a part of an organization. When he was still working for the federal government, he joined the suit to sue the federal government over things like COVID vaccines. So there are organizations out there very good. So I'd encourage you to look up Cameron Hamilton. He's someone that has been in this space, right? How do you fight back, and how do you do it in a way that is obeying the law, but exercising your rights as a citizen. You don't give up your rights as a citizen simply because you serve. But I think he would be able to answer those questions very well, and he's a great guy, great guy. Okay, to the question of, what do we do about it? Is this most important? I have never once gotten up in my entire time in politics and said, this is the most important election of our lifetime. This one is the most important of my lifetime. It is. It is. But here's what I'm going to tell you. If you think, I desperately have a dog in the fight on this one. But I also know this. When I'm most terrified of me getting the person that I want in the White House, and then everyone's saying, oh, we're good. No, we're not. This is a cultural battle much more than it is a political one. We're in the political mess that we're in because of the state of our schools, because of the state of our institutions, because of the state of our families. And the government didn't cause that. It might have contributed to it, but it is undeniable fact that in representative government, you get the government you deserve. And I will tell you right now, I think we need to keep our eye on the ball when it comes to politics, absolutely. But the thing that will save this country is a renewed faith and understanding that God is sovereign, but He has given us responsibilities. Men, we are supposed to lead. We are supposed to be there for our families. Our wives are supposed to know that we are loyal to them, we are honorable for them, that we will protect them. Our kids have to know that. We need to be representing to our sons what a man should be. We need to be representing to our daughters what they should expect out of a man. And the same thing with moms. I have a great relationship with my father. I was primarily raised by a single mother who worked incredibly hard and was honorable and noble. I once asked my wife, because we had an agreement when we first got married. We had an agreement that when we started having kids, she didn't want our income to be based on both of us working. And so we planned for that. And since then, she's had to raise kids while I was off at war. She's homeschooled all three of our kids, and I asked her at one point, I said, because she always has this thing where she almost feels like she didn't have a career. And I said, gosh, stop that. Describe what you did. What was your job? And she came back and she said, my job wasn't just facilities management of the home. It wasn't just daycare. My job was to create an environment that represented education, compassion, nurturing, and peace. The reason why I had a good relationship with my kids was because when I was gone for 9 months, my wife was on the home front, not being bitter about me being gone, but telling my children, Daddy's out there protecting us. He has a job and so do we. This idea of the family coming together and representing and recognizing that men and women, we're not in competition with one another. We should be in cooperation with one another. That can include working outside the home, but let's not forget the work that's supposed to take place inside the home for both husbands and wives, both fathers and mothers. We can win this fight in one generation. Because we have more kids. Right? They're fun to make. The point is, we have to start being more intentional about the influences that they have, because the world would love you to believe that you as parents lack the influence because you don't have the educational expertise or you can't compete with Hollywood. I'm telling you right now, your kids desire that relationship with you so badly. And you would be shocked at the little things that you can do that will have such an amazing impact. So focus on the things first and foremost that you can control, that are your God-given duties and responsibilities. And then here's step 2. Understand something. I don't know what happens after this next election. But I said it last time I was here, and I'll say it this way. I've already made up my mind. This is my country. This is my home. This is the hill I die on. And regardless of the outcome, I'm fighting for every inch of it. And I want to do that alongside people that have the same values and the same convictions. This country started off not with some big professional army defeating the British. It started off with people that cared about their home, cared about their family, cared about their God, cared about their rights, and were willing to sacrifice everything in the spite of overwhelming odds against them. Those are the sort of people I want to fight alongside regardless of the odds. Because ultimately, all of our responsibility
All of our responsibility is to be more concerned about what God says when we arrive than what man says when we're gone. So let's go do that. Thank you, guys.